Get on the ground, now! The voice thundered through the courthouse lobby, slicing through the morning chatter like a gunshot. Dozens of people froze, lawyers mid-conversation, families waiting for hearings, reporters checking their cameras, and in the middle of that polished marble floor stood a single woman, black, mid-30s, slim, confident posture, dressed in a soft gray suit and heels that clicked like punctuation marks with every step. Dr. Alicia Monroe. The officer stormed toward her, hand already on his holster. "Did you hear me? I said down!" Alicia blinked, startled but steady. "Excuse me?" "Don't excuse me. Officer Daniels snapped, his voice rising. "You just walked through a restricted zone." "Hands where I can see 'em!" People started whispering. Someone pulled out a phone. A clerk gasped. "Wait, she's with—" But it was too late. Daniels grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back, and slammed her onto the marble. Her head hit the floor with a sickening thud that echoed up the columns. A sharp cry escaped her lips, half from pain, half from disbelief. "Sir," she managed, her voice muffled against the tile. "You're making a— Quiet!" he barked. "You move, and I'll cuff you right now." Her papers scattered, neat folders bursting open like feathers, legal documents sliding across the floor, stamped with gold seals and heavy signatures. People were filming now. A few laughed. A few looked away. Another one trying to sneak through, someone muttered. She probably thought her little badge would get her in anywhere. Daniels smirked, looking down at her. "You people never learn, do you? Think the rules don't apply." Alicia's breathing quickened. Her heart pounded. "But not from fear. From fury, officer," she said quietly. "You're detaining the wrong person." "Oh, really?" he sneered, pressing harder on her back. "You a judge? You a senator?" The crowd chuckled. "I wrote the law," she whispered. He froze, just a flicker of hesitation, before scoffing. "Sure you did, sweetheart. And I'm the president." He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Daniels. I've got a suspect refusing commands." But then a voice cut through the lobby, calm, commanding, female. "Officer Daniels. Let her go. Now!" The entire room went silent. The voice belonged to Judge Evelyn Cross, presiding over courtroom 2B, a woman known for her zero tolerance for misconduct. She strode into the lobby, black robes flowing, heels sharp against the floor. Her expression was stone. Daniels blinked. "Ma'am, she crossed into—" "I don't care if she walked through the ceiling," the judge snapped. "You just assaulted Dr. Alicia Monroe." The color drained from his face. "Dr. Alicia Monroe," Judge Cross repeated. "Harvard Law, civil rights attorney, chief policy advisor to the governor, and the primary author of the Police Accountability Reform Act, the same one you were supposed to read before putting that badge on. A pin could have dropped in that silence." Daniels looked down at the woman he'd just slammed into the ground. Her lip was bleeding. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her scattered papers. I didn't know," he stammered. Alicia stood, slowly, deliberately. She didn't shout, didn't curse. She just looked at him. One long, measured stare that made every onlooker squirm. "You didn't need to know," she said softly. "You just needed to listen." She brushed the dust from her blazer, straightened the collar, and looked around the room. Dozens of phones were still filming. "You all saw it," she said quietly. "This is why that law exists." Judge Cross stepped beside her. "Dr. Monroe, are you injured?" Alicia smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Only my patience." The judge's face softened. "We'll take care of it." She turned to the officer. "Daniels, hand over your badge." Effective immediately, the color drained from his face. "Ma'am, please, Now." His hands shook as he unclipped the badge from his chest and placed it on the judge's palm. Every camera caught the moment. The same officer, who had just humiliated a black woman in front of a crowd, was now standing in silence, stripped of authority by the very system he'd abused. Alicia bent down and picked up one of her folders. The title page was visible for a second before she tucked it under her arm. State Policy Draft, Accountability and Use of Force. Someone in the crowd gasped. Wait, she really did write the law? Alicia turned toward the exit, her heels clicking against the tile. As she passed Daniels, she stopped. Looked him dead in the eye. Next time you see a black woman walk into a courthouse, she said, you might want to ask what room she owns before you put her on the floor. And then she walked out, head high, blood still at the corner of her mouth, leaving behind a silence that no one dared to break. The video went viral within hours. 50 million views before sunset. The hashtag #SheWroteTheLaw exploded across every platform. By morning, every major network in America was replaying the clip. Police officer slams prominent civil rights lawyer. Author of Police Accountability Act assaulted by officer enforcing. It. Justice comes full circle in courthouse incident. But for Alicia, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about what came next, because what happened in that courthouse wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something much bigger, a reckoning that would shake an entire department, change how justice was taught, and reveal a truth no one saw coming. And she was ready. By sunrise, every major morning show had the clip. Alicia's face filled TV screens from D.C. to Dallas. Her voice, calm, poised, cutting through chaos, played on loop. And that final line, you might want to ask what room she owns before you put her on the floor. It became the quote of the year. But fame, especially the kind that starts with humiliation, comes wrapped in fire. By 9:00 a.m., Alicia's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Hundreds of missed calls, reporters, civil rights groups, even a senator's office. Her mother called first. Baby, I saw it on the news. They had no right to touch you like that. Are you okay? Alicia forced a smile, though her jaw still ached. I'm fine, Mom, just tired. Fine? Her mother scoffed. You were bleeding on national television. Alicia didn't argue. She couldn't. Because deep down, she knew her mother wasn't just angry. She was scared. Scared of what always came after moments like this. Because when a black woman stands up to power, the applause is loud. But the backlash is louder. By noon, the courthouse was surrounded by protesters. Some held signs that read, "She wrote the law." Others screamed, "Justice for Alicia." Through megaphones, camera crews swarmed the steps. Every angle of that marble floor replayed in slow motion. And somewhere inside the same building, Officer Daniels sat alone in an interrogation room, staring at a blank wall. He'd been suspended pending investigation, but that wasn't what haunted him. It was her face. The calm in her eyes when she said, "You didn't need to know. You just needed to listen." His lawyer paced the floor. "We'll argue it was a misunderstanding, Daniels." "You were following procedure." Daniels' jaw tightened. "Procedure doesn't slam lawyers to the ground." He didn't mean to say it out loud. But once he did, he couldn't stop. "I just saw someone who didn't look like she belonged. Someone who didn't look like authority." He dropped his head. "Guess I was wrong." Meanwhile, Alicia sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, watching her own face on CNN. Dr. Alicia Monroe, civil rights attorney and author of the Police Accountability Reform Act, was assaulted yesterday by Officer James Daniels in the state courthouse lobby. Every word felt surreal. Her name, her work, her humiliation, all packaged neatly into a news segment between a car commercial and a weather report. She scrolled through comments online. Some were supportive. Finally, justice has a face. She handled that better than I ever could. This woman is the definition of grace under fire. But others cut deep. She probably staged it for attention. If she really wrote that law, she should have known better than to provoke the officer. Always playing the victim. Alicia closed her laptop and exhaled. That was the part no one saw. The quiet after the storm. When the noise becomes poison. By afternoon, things escalated. The police union released a statement. Officer Daniels followed standard protocol when encountering an unidentified individual in a restricted area. We urge the public not to rush to judgment. Alicia read it twice. Unidentified individual. She'd shown her credentials twice. The lie burned hotter than the bruise on her cheek. Her phone rang again. This time, the governor's office. Alicia, the chief of staff began, voice cautious. "We need to manage this. The press is calling for a full departmental review. You're trending everywhere." "Good," she said flatly. "Maybe that means people are finally paying attention." The chief hesitated. "You don't understand. The union's already lawyering up. They're threatening a lawsuit, defamation, misconduct, the works. They're painting you as confrontational." Alicia laughed, a low, disbelieving sound. "They assaulted me and now I'm the threat. That's how this works, Alicia. Optics over truth. We need to be strategic." But Alicia wasn't thinking about optics. She was thinking about that marble floor, the cameras, the laughter, the look in that officer's eyes when he assumed she didn't belong. She'd written the law to prevent exactly this. And yet, she'd become another example of why it was needed. That night, Alicia appeared on national television for the first time. Not as a commentator, not as an expert, but as the woman at the center of the story. The anchor leaned forward. "Dr. Monroe, millions have seen the video. Some call it justice in action, others call it overreaction. What do you call it?" Alicia looked straight into the camera. "I call it Tuesday." The studio went silent. "Because this happens every week, to people whose names you'll never learn, whose stories won't go viral. I just happen to have credentials that forced the system to care." The anchor blinked, thrown off. "And what do you say to those who argue the officer made an honest mistake?" She didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch. "I say if that's honesty, the truth is in danger." By the time she walked off that stage, her phone had 100 new messages. Some from friends, some from strangers, and one from an unknown number that made her stop cold. "You're destroying good officers' careers. Don't make this worse for yourself." No signature. Just that. She stared at the message for a long time. Then, calmly, she deleted it. Because if they thought fear would silence her, they didn't know Alicia Monroe. She'd spent her life fighting systems that refused to see her. Now the entire nation was watching, and she was about to show them what real accountability looked like.
By Thursday morning, the story had shifted, just as Alicia knew it would. The headlines weren't about the assault anymore. They were about her reaction. Attorney becomes aggressive after courtroom incident. Was this a setup to push her own agenda? Officer's reputation in tatters as activist lawyer fans the flames. Alicia scrolled through the headlines with her coffee untouched. The words blurred together like smoke. By the end of the week, the same media that had called her a hero now painted her as a problem. Her assistant, Jasmine, burst into the office, waving her phone. "Ma'am, the police union just filed a motion demanding your arrest for interfering with an officer's duties. They're trying to flip it on you." Alicia didn't flinch. "Of course they are." "Should we issue a statement?" Alicia set her cup down slowly. "No, not yet. Let them think I'm quiet." Because Alicia had learned something every good lawyer eventually does. You don't win battles by shouting first. You win them by letting your opponent underestimate you long enough to expose themselves. That afternoon, she walked into her office to find a man waiting near the window. He wore a simple gray suit, no tie, eyes sharp as glass. "Miss Monroe?" he asked, though he already knew. "Dr. Monroe. And you are?" He held up a badge. "Internal Affairs." "I'm here regarding the courthouse incident. We're conducting an internal review." Alicia studied him. His voice was polite but detached, the tone of someone pretending to seek truth while quietly building a case against her. "Internal review?" she repeated, "meaning the department investigates itself?" He offered a faint smile. "We prefer the term independent oversight." "Of course you do." She sat down, folding her hands. "Go ahead. Ask your questions." He cleared his throat. "Officer Daniels claims you refused to identify yourself and became confrontational." Alicia raised an eyebrow. Did he also claim gravity stopped working? The investigator smirked in spite of himself. So that's a no? That's a lie, she said flatly. I showed him my ID twice. The cameras prove it. You've seen the footage. He hesitated. The department's reviewing the footage for context. Alicia leaned forward. You mean you're editing it? The silence that followed told her everything. 2 days later, her office email was hacked. Private client records leaked to the press, snippets taken out of context to make her look reckless, biased, even unethical. Civil rights lawyer hides misconduct evidence. Monroe accused of manipulating testimony. It was all fake, but that didn't matter. In the court of public opinion, perception is verdict. Her sponsors began calling. One foundation quietly withdrew funding for her legal clinic. Another asked to pause their partnership until the situation stabilizes. Her paralegal, Devon, slammed his fist on the desk. They're trying to bury you, Alicia. She didn't look up from her files. Then let them dig. They'll find something they didn't expect. Because Alicia wasn't just a lawyer. She was the woman who wrote the Police Accountability Act, and buried inside that legislation was something no one seemed to remember. A clause requiring all departments to maintain public transparency of body cam footage during investigations involving civil rights attorneys. She'd written that clause for others, never imagining it would one day protect her. That night she met quietly with her old mentor, retired Judge Eleanor Banks. The cafe was nearly empty, save for the hum of old jazz and the hiss of a coffee machine. You stirred up a hornet's nest, Alicia, the judge said, stirring sugar into her cup. They're afraid of you. I'm afraid of them, Alicia admitted softly. Not for what they'll do, but for how many people will believe them. Judge Banks smiled sadly. You've been in this game long enough to know fear doesn't silence power. It reveals it. I keep thinking, Alicia said, staring into her cup. I wrote that law to make sure officers faced consequences for excessive force. I built every word to prevent exactly what happened to me. And it worked, the judge said gently. Just not how you expected. Alicia frowned. Meaning? Meaning they showed their hand. The system exposed itself on camera. That's what happens when arrogance meets law. The following Monday, Alicia received an anonymous envelope. Inside were printed photographs, time-stamped body cam stills showing something she hadn't seen before. Officer Daniels, 5 minutes before their encounter, laughing with 2 other officers in the courthouse lobby. One text overlay from the security footage. Watch this. I'll make her lose it. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't just bias. This was premeditated humiliation. She stared at the photographs until her hands trembled. Then she reached for her phone. Devon, she said, voice calm but burning, get me every second of surveillance from that courthouse. Every angle, every minute. And tell the press, the real press, I'll be holding a conference tomorrow morning. The next day, Alicia stood on the courthouse steps again, but this time she wasn't alone. Hundreds filled the plaza, lawyers, students, journalists, and faces from every walk of life. People who'd been dismissed, doubted, disrespected, and told to stay quiet. She faced the cameras, holding up the photographs. This, she said, her voice carrying over the crowd, isn't a misunderstanding. It's a mindset. Gasps rippled through the audience. These images show what happens when people with power believe they're above accountability. And they're not just laughing at me, they're laughing at every person who's ever been told they don't belong in the rooms they helped build. The crowd erupted. Cheers, tears, fists raised in solidarity. And somewhere in the back, Officer Daniels watched in silence, face pale, realization dawning. Because for the first time, he saw not a woman he'd thrown to the ground, but the storm he'd unleashed. That night, Alicia's press conference dominated every network. Hashtag She Wrote the Law trended globally. Donations flooded into her foundation. The governor announced an emergency ethics review of the entire police department. But beneath the applause, Alicia stayed focused, because she knew this wasn't over. The system doesn't surrender, it recalibrates. And the louder you get, the quieter its knives become. Still, she made herself a promise as she watched the city lights shimmer outside her window. If they wanted to fight dirty, she'd fight smart. Because this wasn't just her battle anymore. It was every woman who'd ever been silenced, every man who'd ever been profiled, every soul who'd ever been told to stay in their place. The summons arrived at dawn. A white envelope slipped beneath her office door. No name, no return address, just the seal of the State Ethics Review Board. Inside, a single sentence. You are hereby requested to appear for an internal disciplinary hearing at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Alicia stared at the paper, her pulse tightening. There was no signature, no explanation, just a quiet threat disguised as formality. She looked out the window, downtown waking up, sunlight bleeding across the skyline. She knew what this meant. The department was moving faster than usual, too fast. This wasn't a review. This was retaliation. By morning, her office felt colder, the air heavier. Jasmine and Devon watched silently as Alicia gathered her files, her black leather folder worn from years of trials. "Are you sure you want to go alone?" Devon asked. She nodded. "If I bring anyone, they'll say I'm making it political. If I go alone, they'll underestimate me. Again." Jasmine stepped forward, voice trembling. "They're scared of you, Dr. Monroe." Alicia smiled faintly. "Good. Fear means they're finally paying attention." The hearing room wasn't a courtroom. It was worse. No jury, no cameras, no public eye. Just 5 men in gray suits and 1 woman with an expression carved from stone. The walls were windowless, the light too bright. Alicia's heels echoed like gunshots as she entered. "Dr. Monroe," said the man in the center, a white-haired official named Harold Pritchard. "Thank you for joining us on such short notice." "I wasn't aware I had a choice," Alicia replied evenly, taking her seat. He smiled thinly. "You always have a choice, Doctor. Compliance or consequences." The others chuckled softly. Pritchard flipped through a folder thick with papers. "It says here," he began, "that during the incident, you initiated physical resistance." Alicia blinked. "You've seen the footage." "We have," he said, "but context matters. You were in a restricted area. I was a licensed attorney attending a public trial." "It nevertheless," he interrupted, "the officer claims he feared for his safety." Alicia leaned back, crossing her arms. "Does the footage show me threatening him, or simply standing in my own skin?" The woman on the panel looked up, a brief flicker of sympathy in her eyes, quickly masked. Pritchard continued, unbothered. "We're also concerned about your conduct after the incident, your press conference, your social media presence. You've ignited significant unrest." "Unrest," Alicia repeated softly. "You mean awareness." He ignored her. "The department believes your actions have undermined public trust." She met his gaze. "Public trust isn't undermined by the truth. It's destroyed by the people who hide it." The room fell silent. Pritchard's expression hardened. "You are very clever, Doctor, But cleverness doesn't absolve you of consequences. Alicia tilted her head slightly. Neither does cowardice. A sharp murmur rippled through the room. For a brief second, Alicia thought she saw something, not anger, but fear, flash in Pritchard's eyes. When the hearing adjourned for recess, Alicia stepped into the corridor. The marble floor stretched endlessly beneath flickering fluorescent lights. It was then she noticed a man waiting near the exit, the same internal affairs agent who'd visited her days before. He approached quietly, speaking low. "They want your license suspended, Dr. Monroe, possibly revoked." Alicia's breath caught. "For what?" He hesitated. "For conduct unbecoming of an officer of the court. They're calling you a security threat to the judiciary." She laughed hollow, bitter. "A security threat. I was the one thrown to the ground." He glanced around, then leaned closer. "You didn't hear this from me, but they're building a file. Daniel's attorney's been pushing a narrative that you attacked him first." "That's absurd," she said. "Maybe, but they don't need truth, just doubt." That night, Alicia sat in her office long after everyone had gone home. The only light came from her desk lamp, casting a small golden circle over a mountain of files. Her reflection stared back from the dark window, tired, fierce, and utterly alone. She thought about the years she'd spent drafting laws to protect people from exactly this kind of weaponized bureaucracy. She'd believed in reform, in paperwork, in policy, in the system's ability to heal itself. But now she saw it for what it was, a machine that eats its own architects the moment they stop serving it. Her phone buzzed, another message from Judge Banks. "Remember, power doesn't respond to anger. It responds to exposure. Make them see you." Alicia closed her eyes. That was it. She'd spent weeks defending herself. Now, she'd make them defend their lies. The next morning, when the panel reconvened, Alicia walked in carrying a single USB drive. "Dr. Monroe," Pritchard said coldly, "we're ready to issue a recommendation." Not. The video hit the internet like a thunderclap. It started as a quiet upload on a legal accountability forum, but within an hour, it had crossed platforms: Reddit, TikTok, X, and eventually CNN. By noon, Alicia Monroe's face filled every screen in America. The same woman who'd been slammed to the ground was now standing tall in front of a government seal, her voice steady, her evidence undeniable. The caption beneath her image read, "Attorney who wrote the law uses it to expose police abuse." The city that once tried to silence her couldn't stop talking about her. By the time she reached her office that morning, the street outside the courthouse was lined with protesters. Some held hand-painted signs that read, "Protect the protectors." "She wrote the law. They broke it." "Justice has a name, Alicia Monroe." Reporters shouted questions from behind metal barricades. "Dr. Monroe, how did you get the footage? Do you plan to sue the department? Is it true the officer's been suspended?" Alicia kept walking, calm but resolute. She didn't need to shout anymore. The world was shouting for her. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere had changed. The same officers who once smirked when she walked by now lowered their eyes. Officer Daniels hadn't been seen since the video dropped. Rumor had it he was placed on immediate administrative leave, but what no one could confirm was that federal investigators had already stepped in. Judge Banks called her into chambers. When Alicia entered, the judge stood instead of sitting, a small but powerful gesture of respect. "Sit down, Alicia," she said softly. "You've caused quite the stir." "I didn't plan for it." Banks smiled faintly. "No, but truth rarely asks for permission before making noise." Alicia exhaled. "They'll come after me harder now." The judge nodded. "They will, but they'll have to do it under the spotlight you just turned on." That same afternoon, the mayor's office issued a public statement. Effective immediately, Officer Samuel Daniels has been suspended pending investigation. The City of Washington will conduct a full internal review of the incident involving Dr. Alicia Monroe. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was the first crack in a wall that had stood for decades. Hours later, as Alicia sat in her office reviewing new case files, her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Dr. Monroe. The voice was male, quiet, gravelly, cautious. This is Detective Marcus Hale. I used to work with Daniels. Alicia straightened. Why are you calling me? I saw what happened. I saw it live, and I saw how they tried to twist it. There was a pause. They told us you were arrogant, that you looked down on cops. But that day in court, he provoked you. It was deliberate. Alicia's pulse quickened. Are you saying? I'm saying Daniels wasn't acting alone, he interrupted. Someone in the DA's office wanted to discredit you. They were afraid of your proposed reform bill, the one limiting qualified immunity for officers. The air in the room shifted. Alicia gripped the phone tighter. Do you have proof? I do, he said. Internal memos, communications, even a briefing where they plan to neutralize your credibility. He exhaled deeply. I can't send them from my work device. They're watching everything, but I'll find a way. Why are you helping me? Alicia asked quietly. Because, Hale said, I've worn this badge 20 years, and I'm tired of being part of something that calls corruption procedure. Then the line went dead. That night, Alicia sat alone in her apartment. The city lights blinked through her window like a pulse. Her inbox overflowed, invitations from news networks, universities, human rights organizations. But she ignored them all. She scrolled instead through the messages pouring in from ordinary people, mothers, veterans, retired teachers, even other lawyers who'd stayed silent too long. You spoke for me. They did this to my son. I thought no one would ever fight them and win. Thank you. Each word felt heavier than the last. It wasn't fame she'd earned, it was faith. At midnight, there was a knock on her door. Devon and Jasmine stood outside, faces lit by the hallway light, eyes wide with excitement. You're trending in 20 countries, Jasmine said breathlessly. The White House press secretary even mentioned your name. Devon handed her a tablet. You have to see this. On screen was a live news broadcast, the anchor's tone reverent. In an extraordinary development, new evidence has surfaced suggesting a coordinated attempt to discredit Dr. Alicia Monroe, the author of the Transparency and Accountability Act. Sources claim federal agencies are now involved in reviewing her case. Alicia stared, silent. This isn't about one cop anymore, Devon said. This is about the system itself. Jasmine nodded. You didn't just win your case, Dr. Monroe. You changed the game. Alicia looked at them both, the pride in their faces, the hope she'd almost forgotten to feel. She smiled softly. Then let's make sure they never change it back. By dawn, the city was buzzing again, but this time not with chaos, but with conversation, with questions, with momentum. Church leaders organized forums, students held marches. Judges began citing Alicia's case as precedent in rulings across 3 states. Even police departments quietly started reviewing training programs. The movement had a name now, coined by someone online. #SheWroteTheLaw. Within days, it wasn't just a hashtag. It was a revolution in how America talked about justice, race, and reform. As sunlight spilled into her office, Alicia glanced at a framed quote on her desk that her mother had given her long ago. The law is only as just as the hands that hold it. She traced the words with her finger, whispering to herself. They tried to break these hands, but they just taught them to fight smarter. Her phone buzzed again, this time from an encrypted number. A single message appeared. Files ready. They go public tomorrow. M.H. Alicia leaned back, closing her eyes. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a real smile. The aftershock was no longer about her survival. It was about systemic reckoning. And she was ready for round two. The leak hit the internet before sunrise. It wasn't just a file, it was a flood. Emails, transcripts, phone recordings, an entire archive exposing the city's most powerful officials. The subject line on every document read, "Project Clean Slate Confidential." And in the middle of it all was her name, Dr. Alicia Monroe, the woman they labeled a disruption, the woman they called too emotional to lead, the woman they thought they could silence. Now her name appeared on every major network's breaking news banner. At 6:12 a.m., CNN's broadcast filled living rooms across America. Explosive evidence has surfaced linking high-ranking officials in the district attorney's office and local law enforcement to an internal campaign aimed at discrediting attorney and civil rights advocate Dr. Alicia Monroe. The leak includes communications detailing coordinated efforts to frame her as unstable following her confrontation with Officer Daniels last month. Footage rolled, snippets of Daniels' body cam, then internal memos signed by Assistant District Attorney Walter Briggs. The anchor continued, in one email, Briggs writes, "If she keeps pushing this qualified immunity bill, we'll make her the example every other reformer fears becoming." The country watched in disbelief. By 8 a.m., her office was swarmed again, but this time not by protesters or hecklers. It was journalists, human rights lawyers, federal agents with serious faces and crisp suits. One of them flashed a badge, Special Agent Rivera, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Dr. Monroe, we'd like your cooperation. You've just become a key witness in an ongoing corruption investigation. Alicia blinked. You mean the investigation I've been calling for the last 3 years? The agent gave a faint smile. Yes, ma'am, that one. Across town, chaos erupted in the district attorney's office. Briggs slammed his desk phone down as headlines screamed his name. Who the hell leaked it? He barked. His assistant trembled. Sir, it's everywhere. Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, even TikTok. Someone mirrored the entire file system. Briggs turned pale. That can't be possible. Those archives were sealed. They're not sealed anymore, sir, she whispered. The encryption key came from an active badge number, Detective Marcus Hale. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Briggs muttered, He's finished. They all are. Meanwhile, Alicia sat in her office surrounded by her small team, Jasmine, Devin, and 2 paralegals who hadn't slept since the story broke. Feds are moving fast. They've already issued warrants for Briggs and Daniels. Jasmine looked up from her laptop. Public opinion's exploding. You've become a symbol of systemic reform. They're calling it the Monroe effect. Alicia frowned. I'm not a symbol. I'm a reminder that justice doesn't belong to the powerful. Hours later, the FBI held a press conference. Reporters crowded the podium. Flashes burst like fireworks as Agent Rivera stepped forward. We have initiated a multi-agency investigation into the coordinated suppression of reform efforts and misuse of authority within the Metropolitan Justice Department. This includes an illegal campaign targeting civil rights attorney Dr. Alicia Monroe. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Our evidence suggests a network of officials engaged in deliberate obstruction, unlawful surveillance, and retaliatory conduct. These actions violated both state and federal law. When asked for comment, Rivera added one line that made national headlines. Justice has no rank, no title, and no immunity. At that same moment, Alicia's phone buzzed again, a new message. It was from Marcus Hale. It's done. They have everything. Thank you for not giving up. Alicia typed back, You risked everything for the truth. His reply came seconds later. You taught me it was worth it. That evening, the courthouse, the same one where she'd once been humiliated, stood surrounded by TV vans and protesters. But this time, the chants were different. Justice for Alicia! End qualified immunity! Accountability now! Inside, the city council convened an emergency hearing. Alicia was invited to testify, not as a defendant, but as an expert witness. As she walked into the chamber, the crowd stood. Judges, lawyers, citizens, all on their feet. The sound of applause filled the grand marble hall. For a moment, she froze. Not from fear this time, from realization. This was the sound of change. Councilwoman Rivera leaned into the microphone. Dr. Monroe, we owe you an apology. You've exposed what many of us ignored for too long. Alicia nodded, her tone calm but cutting. An apology is a start, but accountability is the cure. The crowd murmured in agreement. She continued, I didn't fight this battle for myself. I fought it for every woman who's been silenced, every black professional dismissed, every officer who wanted to do right but was told to look away. Her words hit like thunder. I wrote the law they broke, but I'll write another to make sure it never happens again. The room erupted in applause. By the next morning, the dominoes began to fall. Briggs was arrested for obstruction and conspiracy. Daniels was indicted for assault under color of law. 3 senior officials resigned before federal indictments reached their desks, and the governor himself called Alicia with an invitation. We'd like you to lead the new Public Integrity Task Force. Alicia hesitated. That would make me the one policing the people who tried to destroy me. The governor chuckled softly. Exactly. But amid the chaos and praise, Alicia's thoughts drifted to someone else. The people who'd quietly suffered, without cameras, without leaks, without anyone listening. She opened her laptop and began drafting something new. The Justice Renewal Initiative. A national program to train underrepresented young lawyers in civil rights litigation and public accountability. At the bottom, she wrote the mission statement herself. For every voice that was silenced, until one spoke loud enough for all to be heard. She paused, stared at the words, and whispered, This time, no one fights alone. The next morning, the newspapers told the story in bold letters across the front page. The woman who wrote the law just rewrote history. The courthouse smelled like rain and old stone. Reporters filled every seat, cameras perched like vultures, lenses trained on the mahogany doors of courtroom 7B. Behind them, protesters held signs that read, No one is above the law. Justice for Alicia. Inside, the air buzzed with the sound of whispered anticipation. The clock struck 9 a.m. The bailiff stepped forward. All rise. And as the heavy doors opened, in walked Dr. Alicia Monroe. She wasn't in handcuffs this time. She wasn't trembling or explaining herself to men who had already made up their minds. She was walking tall, composed, in a slate-gray suit that carried the calm weight of authority. Behind her, her legal team. Beside her, 2 FBI agents. And directly across the courtroom, sitting at the defense table, were the men who had once tried to destroy her. Walter Briggs, Officer Daniels, Chief of Police Harold Kane. Each of them looked older now, not in years, but in truth. The kind of age that comes when power starts to rot. The judge adjusted his glasses. Dr. Monroe, he began, I understand you've requested to deliver your statement personally. Yes, Your Honor, she said, standing straight. I believe it's time they hear it from the woman they tried to erase. A hush fell over the room. She approached the stand. No notes, no hesitation, just truth, heavy and clear. When I walked into this building 6 months ago, I was shoved, handcuffed, and accused of obstructing justice for demanding that it be served. A murmur rippled through the gallery. They said I was angry, emotional, unfit. What they meant was I was a black woman who didn't bow. She turned toward Briggs. "You orchestrated a campaign to destroy my reputation. You broke laws that I helped write. You thought your power could outlast my voice." Then she turned to Daniels. "You slammed me onto that marble floor like I was a threat, when all I did was ask a question. You didn't see a lawyer that day. You saw a stereotype, and you acted on it." Daniels shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. Alicia continued, her tone unshaken. "Every bruise I carried became a testimony. Every insult became evidence. And now, every one of you sits where you belong, under the law you claim to defend." The room was silent except for the scribbling of reporters. Briggs tried to interject, his voice brittle. "She's grandstanding, Your Honor." But the judge raised a hand. "Let her finish." Alicia's eyes stayed fixed on him. "I don't need to grandstand. The truth stands tall enough on its own." She stepped back slightly, her voice softening. "This isn't just about me. It's about every citizen who's ever been silenced because someone with a badge, a title, or a disk full of connections told them they didn't matter." Her gaze swept across the room. "This trial isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of a reckoning." The prosecutor rose next, introducing a stack of evidence that landed on the table with a heavy thud. Encrypted drives, email chains, and signed directives, all showing one thing: a conspiracy to intimidate, manipulate, and destroy. Screens lit up as Briggs's own voice filled the courtroom. "She's a problem. If she wants reform, we'll give her a reason to regret it." The jurors froze. Daniels dropped his pen, and for the first time, Briggs looked afraid. 3 days later, the verdict came. The jury forewoman stood. On the count of conspiracy to obstruct justice, guilty. On the count of abuse of authority, guilty. On the count of unlawful assault, guilty. The judge nodded sullenly. Sentences were handed down like stones dropping into still water. Briggs, 14 years. Daniels, 10 years, stripped of all honors. Chief Kane resigned in disgrace under federal investigation. As the gavel fell for the final time, Alicia closed her eyes. The sound was different now. It didn't echo like judgment. It sounded like release. Outside the courthouse, a crowd waited. As she stepped into the light, the sun broke through gray clouds, soft, golden, defiant. Reporters shouted her name, microphones thrust forward. "Dr. Monroe, how does it feel to win?" She paused, then smiled faintly. This wasn't about winning. It was about reminding the system that justice doesn't belong to those who enforce it. It belongs to those who believe in it. The crowd erupted in applause. A young black girl in the front row held up a handmade sign. "I want to be like you." Alicia knelt down beside her and whispered, "Be better than me. That's the point." That night, she returned home to her quiet apartment overlooking the city. For the first time in months, the air felt still. She poured herself a cup of tea, set it on the windowsill, and looked out at the skyline. A city still learning, still changing. On her desk lay a single framed quote from her late father. "The law is just ink until someone's courage gives it voice." She smiled softly. Guess we gave it a voice, didn't we? The camera would fade here if this were a film, but for Alicia Monroe, this wasn't the end. This was the turning of a page. 6 months later. The marble floor of the Capitol glistened under soft afternoon light. The very halls that once whispered power and exclusion now hummed with voices. Young interns, reporters, community leaders, all gathered for the unveiling of a new legislative initiative, the Monroe Justice and Accountability Act. At the podium stood Dr. Alicia Monroe, The same woman who had once been slammed to that same kind of floor, now standing where lawmakers stood, flanked by flags and surrounded by applause. Her hair, once tangled from chaos and humiliation, was now neatly coiled in a crown of quiet authority. Her eyes held something stronger than triumph. They held peace. 6 months ago, she began, her voice steady. I was lying on a courthouse floor, wondering if justice still existed for people who look like me. A hush filled the chamber. Every camera turned closer. I learned something that day. Justice isn't lost. It's just waiting for someone brave enough to remind it where it belongs. She paused, the silence blooming heavy and electric. This act will ensure that every officer, every public servant, every institution in this country answers to the same law, no exceptions. Because when accountability dies, democracy follows. The room rose to its feet. Reporters captured every word, every glint of fire in her tone. Somewhere in the crowd, a young girl, the same one who had held up that sign outside the courthouse, watched wide-eyed from the front row. Her name was Naya. After the speech, Alicia knelt beside her again, just as she had months before. "You're the reason I do this," she said softly. Naya blinked up. "You mean because I believed you?" Alicia smiled. "No, sweetheart, because you believed in me." Later that night, the city skyline flickered beneath her office window. Her assistant, Jordan, entered quietly. "There's someone here to see you. He says it's important." Alicia looked up, surprised. "Who?" A tall man in a simple navy suit stepped in, his cap clutched nervously in his hands. "Officer Daniels," she said slowly. He looked smaller somehow, not in stature, but in weight. The arrogance that once puffed his chest was gone. "I didn't come for forgiveness," he began. "I came to thank you." Alicia studied him, cautious but calm. "For what?" she asked. "For forcing me to see what I'd become," he said quietly. "They told us power meant control, but it doesn't. It means responsibility. I've been working with community reform programs inside the prison, teaching young officers what not to do." He met her eyes, voice trembling. "You gave me that chance, even when I didn't deserve it." Alicia didn't respond right away. Then she nodded once. "Then don't waste it," she said. He left with tears in his eyes. Weeks later, Alicia appeared on a late-night news program. The host leaned forward. "Dr. Monroe," he said, "many are calling you the new voice of justice. How does that title sit with you?" She smiled faintly. "Justice doesn't need a new voice. It just needs more people willing to use theirs." The audience erupted in applause. By the following year, the Monroe Act had been adopted by 12 states. Police departments nationwide were required to undergo implicit bias training led by civilians. A national registry tracked officer misconduct. And Alicia? She turned her pain into a movement. She founded the Monroe Foundation, an initiative to mentor young law students from underrepresented backgrounds. Every year she handed a scholarship check to one young woman who reminded her of who she once was. On one particularly quiet evening, Alicia returned to the courthouse, the same marble steps where she'd been humiliated, the same place where justice had found its pulse again. She stood there for a long moment, watching the sunset reflect off the tall glass buildings. A janitor nearby recognized her. "You're Dr. Monroe, right? The one from the case?" She smiled politely. "That's me." He chuckled softly. "My daughter talks about you all the time, says she wants to be a lawyer like you someday." Alicia's smile grew. "Tell her the world needs her." He nodded, then paused. "Ma'am, do you ever think about what happened that day?" She looked up at the fading light. "Every day, but not with anger anymore." He tilted his head. With what, then? She breathed out slowly. With purpose. That night, she sat on her balcony, city lights flickering like distant candles. She pulled out an old letter, one she had written to herself the night after the assault, but never sent. It read, "They can bruise your body, but they can't break your name. The law may forget you, but the truth will never will." She smiled, folded it carefully, and placed it beside her father's quote on the desk. Then she turned to her computer and began typing a new headline for her foundation's upcoming campaign. Justice is not a system, it's a promise. Epilogue. The video of her story went viral again, reaching millions, not because of rage this time, but because of hope. Teachers played it in classrooms, churches quoted her words, politicians cited her courage, and in homes across America, young black girls watched her on their screens and whispered to themselves, "Maybe one day that could be me." The final line of the video fades on her voice, calm and resolute. "They called me a criminal, but the truth called me something else, a citizen who refused to kneel." The screen fades to black, soft piano music plays, and the final words appear. Dedicated to every woman who fought to be heard and made the world listen.